Welcome to another episode of Leadership Live, and I'm here with Chris Pienkowski, the
Whoa.
operator. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good, JJ. How are you?
Man, I'm great. I'm having a awesome weekend. Freaking on Monday, my son and I we are going to be doing 2 weeks of doing all this from a different location because, well, I'm going to go help a friend who had some flooding issues over in West Virginia. So
Oh,
um, I'm going to be, who knows what the background's going to look like because he's had some significant issues. It flooded his whole first floor
oh, dude.
of his house. Yes. And so we're going to be over there chopping down trees, clearing a hill, and then I'll still do the podcasting for the appointments that I have set up. So it's going to be interesting. What's new with you?
Well, the beauty of that is like you can be mobile, right?
Yes.
You and I have done a leadership live while I was in Florida, and
Yes.
we did it from a hotel room. So, it's that's the beauty of technology. You don't have to be nailed down in a studio.
No, we don't. And speaking of that, the reason I brought that up is because that's a great way to segue into our topic today.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about change management. And I mean, simply put, and I know you and I are going to be elaborating a lot more on this, it's basically just the process of knowing that you have to make a change in something, whether it's in your organization, a personnel process. In my case, it's going to be going to work from another location and figuring out how the implementation of that change is not only going to affect the organization, but how you're going to utilize the personnel within that organization to make that change.
Yes. And, too, like the change that you're making is temporary, right? And it's going to switch up your operations for a couple of weeks. And the scale and the scope of change management can really vary, right? It could be, hey, I'm going to be on the road for 2 weeks, but I'm still going to be able to work, still going to be able to do my podcast, whatever. Or it could be departmental wide. We're making a change that's going to drive more efficiency, more innovation, whatever. It could be organizational wide. So change management is really a big umbrella, and there are a variety of different levels to it.
You're right. And speaking of those different levels, that's a great way to bring up the next step of that. And when you're talking about the different levels, that can be, in my case, I know I'm going to have to travel. So what if I have to make this change and do a podcast while I'm traveling? Well, when I'm there, is there going to be a desk? Is there going to be the lighting? Is there going to be a good enough microphone, an internet connection, which, by the way, that makes me nervous. So who knows if I'll be doing it in a coffee shop or his actual house, because I'm not sure what the internet connection is. But in an organization, that can be different, right? You need to figure out what type of personnel and resources it takes to make that happen. That can be an office move, which, by the way, a lot of people that have never had to do one of those, that is probably a bigger pain in the butt than any day-to-day operation you can get involved with.
Yes.
But there are a lot of logistics involved in that. Or maybe it's, we have to change this one process. We're going to move all of our shipments to a different dock. And, there's a lot that goes into that too, especially if you have digital systems and stuff like that you're using in that warehouse. And so the change management can be anything that makes your operation a little bit different. And, this is why leadership is so important. This is why all of the things we talk about on all these lives are so important, because you have to bring your personnel into this. And if you don't have the buy-in, you don't have the level of influence and trust and all those other things, then when it comes time to make that change, it's either gonna, gosh, what? Bless you, sir.
Sorry,
but it's either gonna go like shit, or it can go very, very smoothly. And when I say smoothly, Murphy gets involved anytime you're executing an operation, but
Dan Murphy.
damn Murphy. But when everyone is working together, it's almost like there's harmony with it. And the people are communicating, and when the choke points come up, you work through it. And so that, this series that we're on right now with change management, and then every step they're in, the most important thing to understand within change management, and you're going to go into this probably in a different way because you always do, is that any change requires communication, process shifts, and buy-in from your people.
Agreed. I want to tackle this from an organizational standpoint, and these same principles can be applied, whether it's a 2-week kind of interruption in our operations, right? So that we can maintain consistency, or if it's going to be, this is a long-term change that we as an organization want to go through. But first things first is you've got to get everyone on the same page about where we are now, and have everyone fully agree that, okay, this is the baseline, right? This is where we are. And now this is where we want to go. So let's have a collaborative process of how we get there. How do we bridge this gap, right? That's where the change management is going to occur. You have to talk about, once we get to here, why, right? Why are we going through this change? What are the benefits to the organization? But that why piece has 2 different components. Component number 1 is, why is the organization changing, right? We're looking for more efficiency. We're looking to grow market share, whatever that why is from a company or organization level. But the second, and I'm going to argue equally important, is, why is this important, or why does it matter to each individual on the team? By us doing this change, it will help to make your job easier, to make your job more efficient, to put more money in your pocket. So when you're trying to, people, right? It's human nature that we don't necessarily want to change, right? We like things how they are, but there are times that we're forced to change. So there needs to be a compelling reason that we as leaders lay out to people so that they have that buy-in. And then you start to involve them along the way. But that's really where we have to start anytime that we're talking about change management, is kind of painting the picture of where we are, where we want to be, how it's going to impact everybody, benefits, and now let's start to rock and roll.
Well, and let's be more clear about that. And I don't know how you've done it in your past companies, or how because I've coached a few companies through this as well, and I'm sure you have, but you also worked I spent my entire professional career, most of it in the military. And then I had a couple companies that I worked for. But, the best practices with this part that you're talking about is, I would consider it creating the mission, the vision, and the commander's intent for the operation, which can just be, you can cut commander out of it and just put the intent, which may be maybe the end state or whatever the case may be. And usually that starts with the first and second in command, or maybe if you have a larger organization, it would be those senior leaders at the very top that have all of the different umbrellas that go out there, or whoever is involved with that. And so you have that conversation with them to create that. If you do it alone, you're going to screw something up. I almost guarantee that. Normally I wouldn't say 100%, but I almost have 100% certainty here that something is going to go wrong if you do not involve, at a minimum, your second in command. Because if you plan out that intent and the vision and the mission behind that change, you're gonna miss something. You need a second set of eyes at a minimum for
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. And so the next step with that, and you laid that out very well. but I just want to make sure that that's not something that happens in the owner's head or something like that. That is something that you lay out as a team as well. Now, once you guys get that figured out, that's when you start whatever team or section of that organization is going to be directly involved with that change. Once you get that set up, because that's going to be like a senior leader's brief to whoever is going to be making that change. You get all of the senior members of that part of the organization, or if it's the whole organization, then all the senior members together and say, we need to game plan this. That's when you plan out the logistics. That's when you plan out the timeline. That's when you plan out all of the things. And the reason that you have those people involved is because you're not going to be doing it. They're going to be doing it. So if you're going to be, if you want that change to happen successfully, then you need to have their input on what works and what doesn't, and how that's going to be laid out during that timeline of change, so that when it's done, it's their plan. Because if you plan that in a vacuum, just with, your second in command, that's going to be screwed up too. And, and that's okay. And that's not because you guys suck at being senior members of the organization. That's not it at all. It's more because you are not on the ground doing the work with those teams. And you should fully expect that once those guys get their guidance, that each individual section, they have those meetings as well. And I would say whatever part of that timeline is included, you'll have checkpoints within that. That way they can provide feedback, because that plan will change probably a bunch of times. And you just have to expect that that's going to happen, because as they get more feedback on the people that are in the roles that are going to be affected, then there's going to need to be some shifts, because some things will work, some things won't. And if they don't get their people involved, then there could be a major part of the operation that is interrupted, that can't be interrupted during that change time. And so just making sure that, you have these tiered planning sessions, it's just really, really important. And I know a lot of people say, well, I like to make things happen fast. Well, you can do it fast, but don't do it by yourself. Get everybody involved. That way it happens a lot more smoothly, and you're not pissing off the entire organization.
No, you're absolutely right. It is so like multi-layered, because once you start at the top, right? The senior leadership sees a need to change, and now you're pulling in that next layer of people so that we can plan it out, right? If this is, let's say that this is a change in our marketing strategy, okay? We're now going after, we've identified a new market segment that our product or service can really play in really well. We can be super competitive. It's an opportunity for us to grow. All right, so now we're talking to marketing, and we're starting to create these plans that are different from what we've always done. You now have to realize what other components of the organization need to know what's going on so that they can plan. Because once that marketing kicks off, now your salespeople are going to start to be going after a different set of customers. They're going to be fielding different sets of questions from people. So they need to be aware. Your operations people need to be able to fulfill this. Your finance people need to be able to bill for it. So once you've set that umbrella at like where the change is happening, you've got to look at all the strings attached to it to understand all the different checkpoints like you were talking about. Okay, how's this affecting ops? How's this affecting sales? Every place across the organization. But the other thing that you said, and I will often talk about this with change management, is that it can be fast, but it has to be methodical. And feedback is really so important. And I like to say that the feedback loops are the links that keep the whole process moving. One of the feedback loops that I like to use whenever I can, I talk to people about this all the time, is something that I read in Jim Mattis's book. And the way that he went about leading all the troops in, well, I think he was in Afghanistan or Iraq, wherever he was like the CENTCOM commander. Mm-hmm. His simple 3-point communications loop was, what do I know? Who else needs to know it? Have I communicated it to them? So helping your people to understand that the the communication part of the change management is essential, and having those feedback loops up and down the chain from the people on the ground all the way to senior leadership is so important, because you said it too. Change is going to happen within that change management, right? We're going to run into unforeseen roadblocks. We're going to come up against something where it's like, hey, you know what? If we want to compete in this market, we need these certain certifications. We need licenses. We need whatever that we didn't anticipate when we were first planning. Now that has to be looped in all the way up to the top, so that we understand if there's going to be a delay in our timeline, or, you know, what other possible things, new resources that are needed. So it's that up and down communication anytime you're going through a change process that really drives the success or failure of that change.
You're right. And, you know, that does something as well. When you allow people to provide that feedback, you're actually empowering them to figure out how to make those changes within their role. Yes. And so by saying, hey, look, this is how we're going to report these changes back and forth, that tells them almost instantly. And if it does, because if it doesn't, then they're going to ask the question, because that gets confusing really fast. You know, does that mean that I'm allowed to have a little bit of flexibility within this change so that I can figure this out? Well, yeah. And so whether that's marketing and sales, so these salespeople on the ground, my gosh, if you just drop it on them last minute, how is that going to affect all of your sales? Because guess what? If you're going for a different marketing segment and you're having certain people shift and maybe some people still doing the same thing, how are they supposed to figure that out? Some people might have to just slowly start going to a different set of people that they're marketing to, or businesses, or whatever the case may be. And if you don't tell them and it's just dropped on them almost instantly, well, now they're going to be scrambling.
Yeah.
But when you can empower them to make that change and giving and communicating early, which normally we say communicate consistently and often, but in change management, it's early, consistently and often. Then now they're going to be going back and forth and talking to other salespeople and talking to their management, talking to their director, and whatever the case may be, to figure out how that's going to change and when they need to start talking to different people, who's going to start talking to different people. I mean, all the eaches aren't really that important in this scenario, but what is important is to know that there needs to be that communication setup that you talked about, so they know that when they run into an issue, they say something to this person, or when they have to make a process change, that they say something to this person, or if everything is getting screwed up, that they got to tell everybody about it. So, I mean, that needs to be set up early. And by the way, if you don't already have that set up just for your day-to-day operations in your business, you should probably do that. Okay.
100%. But, you know, empowerment. You just talked about empowering people to be able to not only make adjustments, right, but to be able to communicate about them.
Yep.
But empowerment equals buy-in. Mm-hmm. When you empower people to be able to raise their hand, to be able to, you know, work within a certain set of guardrails to make changes, then their level of buy-in to the actual change is even greater.
Oh yeah, because you're telling them you trust them.
Exactly. And you know, the other thing too, and I know you and I on our leadership lives have talked about humility. This is where I have seen companies fail, and this is where I've seen companies succeed in getting change management downstream. So for example, when I have taken over departments in the past, or even come in to lead turnarounds, one of the first things that I do is make it clear to everybody that you know more than I do right now. So I am counting on you to be able to provide me guidance. When it fails is when the leader comes in and says, guess what, everybody? I know it all. We're doing A, B, C, and D. You're setting yourself up for failure by assuming that you know everything. And you know what? Let's just give the scenario of I've been in this company, in this industry for the past 15 years, started at the bottom and worked my way up. So theoretically, I probably have a really deep wealth of knowledge. I probably know a whole lot. But if you can step back and say, you know what, everybody, it's been a while since I've been on the floor doing what you do. So let's pretend that I don't know jack shit. You're the captain here, and I'm just kind of pointing out the destination. How do we do this? Where do we go? I mean, I have no problem whatsoever telling the people that are reporting to me that they know more than I do, and let's get your feedback. Let's empower you so that you buy in, and now we're all going to succeed.
You're right. And once execution starts, to be honest with you, when the senior leaders or whoever is leading whatever section or division or whatever the case may be starts going around and double checking on things, because you have to trust, but you also have to verify. And by the way, that verification process, it also means that you're asking them where they need help. Is there something that that could be made better? And you can talk about all the things, but in addition to that, you need to be paying attention to certain things.
Yeah.
I know for a fact from working in support operations roles at multiple levels throughout my careers that you need to pay attention to communication failure. That is very, very important. So there's two different times where you bring everybody together to talk to them about the change management part of the operation. And that's one, when it's time to start planning and executing it. And then two, when they're executing it and you realize that there are some things that need to be done a little bit differently, not operationally. Well, yeah, operationally, but it's when things aren't going well, when the up and down communication starts failing and you see people scrambling around, complaining, doing the whole 9 yards, that's when you bring all the leaders in, whether it's virtually or all in one room, whatever the case may be. And you say, hey, look, you guys are doing fine on a lot of things, but I see one critical point that needs to be fixed. And that's the up and down communication. I don't know what conversations you guys are having with your people on the ground, but we need to fix that, because with change management, and you touched on this, but my gosh, as senior leaders, we have to bring people together to talk about this when we see it failing. But communication is the most important part of change management. If you don't know what's happening, you can't help anybody down trace to fix it.
No, you and I have said in so many different conversations that communication is really the most important part of leadership.
Yes.
Right. And so everything that you and I talk about on these lives with regard to leadership, it should be assumed that communication is probably the most important ingredient. But we can't emphasize that enough. And communication also, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, because I know that I've said this before. Communication is a two-way street. It's the way that we provide and receive information.
Yep.
It's not just the words coming out of my mouth and hoping that they land on your ears in the way that I expected it. It's the way that what you're saying to me, I'm hearing, and then I'm verifying with you, like, hey, JJ, I just want to make sure that you and I are on the same page. This is what I just heard you say, and this is my interpretation of it. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And when you're trying to lead change, it's empowering your people to be able to ask you that same question, right? I want you, JJ, to say to me, hey, Chris, this is what I just heard in that meeting, and this is my interpretation of it. Are we on the same page? Because guess what? If you walk away assuming that you knew what I'm talking about, but there's a question in your mind, then I always say that the only dumb questions are the ones that you don't ask when you're not clear.
Oh, yeah.
So it's giving your people the authority to ask questions and to verify that you and I are on the same page. We're speaking the same language, and what you said is what I heard, and we're like this. So, that the communication piece, so important.
You're right. But I guess to go back to what I was saying, a lot of people get really, really nervous when the change is happening in their organization, especially at the top levels. Because you're right. Just at the beginning of the conversation, you said change is uncomfortable. Nobody really wants to do it. So at the end of the day, we get involved only to a certain extent and when we have to. And usually that is when the communication breaks down. A lot of people want to dive right in and start micromanaging, especially when they have that 25 years of experience that you talked about before. But the job of a leader is to get far back and observe the landscape and only get involved when they absolutely have to, but to make sure they're having the conversations to check in and make sure that they're following up on all the things that are supposed to be done. And that can either be directly reaching out to those people that should be reporting to you, or making sure you're scheduling those weekly check-ins, those daily check-ins, whatever the case may be, to make sure that they are following up with you, which, by the way, is a lot more empowering for them because they don't have to worry about you coming down into their area and getting involved in their operations. But it's really about the culture that you have set up in your organization. There's no good, bad, right, or wrong with that.
That's right. And this is where I've implemented and I've coached organizations around doing this too, is this tool that I like to use is called the leadership traffic light. And it's, think about driving down the road, right? Red, yellow, green. When it's green and we all agree on what the definition of green is, that's business as usual. You guys on the front lines, keep your foot on the gas and keep on going. I don't even need to know about it. If it's yellow, proceed with caution. Hey, we need to get this on the radar of someone higher up in the organization, just in case something, needs to pull them into this situation. But we're just going to continue moving. And when it's red, it's all right. Now we need someone more senior to get involved to help us get through a roadblock, whatever. So to the extent that you can implement that leadership traffic light and people understand what are the ROEs, right? What are the rules of engagement to determine what's red, what's yellow, what's green? That also gives a level of clarity to people of when they need to escalate, when they need to just keep their foot on the gas, and all the kind of the bumper lanes that they can operate within.
Yep. And by the way, if you don't already have one, it should be part of your SOP.
Yeah.
And if people don't understand what's good, bad, right, or wrong, and how to communicate those things and all that other stuff, then talk about it, type it up, put it in your SOP. If you don't have an SOP, shame on you, but everybody should at least have something.
Get an SOP, you SOB.
Oh my God. But you know what? I find more often than not, people are just flying by the seat of their pants.
They are.
Oh gosh. Anyway, we are at the end of this conversation. Do you have Oh gosh, that flew by. This was a fun one. I actually had a lot of fun with this one. No, but do you have anything that you would like to share with the audience before we wrap things up, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'll share quickly is that change management is often more. There's more to it than we think going into it, right? We want to move fast. You can move fast, but understand that there's going to be learning and adjustment along the way. There's no linear path to making change. That's why the communication is important. That's why having benchmarks and milestones are important. So just understand that, simple and easy are two different things.
Yes. I will add to that, not by using the same point that he made, but we talked about a lot of things today. If you listen to this and you start getting freaked out, don't. If you want your organization to get better and better and better and better and better, if you want your team to get better and better and better and better, change has to happen. Don't be afraid of it. You got to embrace the changes, listen to your people when something needs to be fixed or changed or whatever the case may be, and just work through it. That's really all it is. I mean, you guys have, everyone that's listening to this has probably had an oh shit situation happen where you had to make changes happen on the fly. And that's part of day-to-day operations where you're running around with your pants on fire. But, the things that you need to change, that you can work through and do it methodically, don't be afraid of those things. Don't be afraid of those things, because it's going to make you better. It's going to make your people better. And it's going to make your organization better. But that's really all I have to say about that. We don't have these conversations to freak you out. We have these conversations to provide actionable leadership advice that you can take away from this and implement immediately.
That's right.
For anybody who's listening now or listening later, now this is my normal spiel. If you enjoy this stuff, please like. If you're on my YouTube, subscribe. But the most important thing is to keep the conversation going. So put a comment below and ask questions. We'll answer them. Tell us what you want to hear so that we can adjust our topics and bring you the information that you want to know, not the information we want to tell you.
That's right. And the last thing that I'll say here too, JJ, is this is one of the reasons that you and I decided to do series in this this season of Leadership Live, right? So our next topic in 2 weeks is going to be embracing change. So today we talked about, last time we talked about culture. Today we talked about what is change management. In 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about embracing change. So we are getting into some meaty conversations, but we're chaining them together in these bite-sized series, bite-sized episodes, so that you can get a bigger picture of these topic areas. But yes, whatever topics you want us to tackle, drop them into the comments, and we interact in those comments. So,
yes, we do.
Jump in there, ask us questions, and we will get back to you. We will respond.
And I know there are a few of you watching now. If you watch again in 2 weeks, don't be shy.
That's right. Don't be shy. Come on, join the fun.
That's right. All right, everybody. You have a great couple of weeks, and you'll probably see me again before you see Chris. But
yes.
Either way, we'll see you next time.
Awesome. See ya.